Previously, in part 1, I get fed up waiting for calm weather, so decided to go camping for a few days despite forecasts of strong winds. I chose to explore the sheltered coast of Morven, then headed through the Corn Narrows to Fort William and Loch Linnhe, before returning to Loch Linnhe. I was bounced around quite a bit, but eventually made the sheltered waters of Loch Linnhe. I landed in the first sheltered bay to dry off and make myself a coffee. Unfortunately, the bay was shallow for a long way off, and I didn't want the boat to dry out in this location, as I wanted it to be afloat early the following morning, so I looked for a more suitable campsite. I didn't go far before finding a better bay with deeper water where I could keep the boat afloat even at low tide. It wasn't perfect, as a small patch of grass for the tent was on a bit of a slope, but I'm a great believer in any port in a storm will do. I passed a pleasant enough evening, relaxing in the quiet surroundings before retiring for the night. I was not long in my sleeping bag when the sky opened and the rain started to pour down. It was in the forecast, so not a surprise, and I also knew the following day was for more strong winds after a calm start. So I arose at 5 a.m. to dismantle camp and hopefully get down Loch Linnhe before the winds arose. My old bones didn't fancy another bounce around in that exposed loch. The early rise also had the advantage that I was up and about before too many midges were up looking for their breakfast. It was a very atmospheric, if slightly damp morning, and by 6 a.m. I was packed and afloat again, heading for Loch Linnhe and another day's adventure. As I made my way under the Ballachulish Bridge and entered Loch Linnhe, I was delighted to see the turbulent waters of yesterday had gone, and were replaced by an almost flat, calm sea. My early start was paying off. Heading south, the weather appeared to brighten, but looking back beyond the Corn Narrows looked very dark and ominous. I passed Elan Balnagowan and then the Sound of Shuna and Linnhe Marina. Shallow water stopped me from going too close to Castle Stalker. Finally, the northern end of Lismore and its satellite islands came in sight, and I was delighted to have enjoyed the smooth passage down Loch Linnhe. I decided to celebrate by having breakfast on Elan nan Carach, a little island I occasionally camp on when it's not the bird nesting season. However, the harbour wall with lots of black gullumets reminded me it was full-on nesting season, so I had a quick look round before heading to Lismore for breakfast, so as not to disturb the birds too much. Like Lismore, the island's larger neighbour, Elan nan Carach's past lay in the lime industry, and the old lime kilns are still standing. I left the birds to squabble amongst themselves and landed in the quieter shore on Lismore. I made myself a coffee and sandwich, then settled down to watch the world go by. In the peace and quiet of this lovely Lismore location, a large otter appeared carrying its breakfast. It landed in the rocks near me and scoffed its fish while I scoffed my sandwich. It's the sharing of magical moments like this with the locals that really make my day. And as the otter swam off again, I too clambered into my boat and headed on my way. My plan for the day was to head for the sheltered waters of Loch Linnhe for another night's camping. Then the wind could do its worst and I would not have another day bouncing on the briny. It felt a little strange passing within sight of my house without stopping, but as it was the 21st of June and the summer solstice, I didn't want to spend the shortest night of the year in the house. Besides, my tent was still soaking wet from the previous night's rain, and I was looking for an excuse to put it up again so it could dry out. I parked my boat in the river so it was sheltered from any wind-blown loch waves, and it also keeps it afloat at low tide. I pitched my tent in the same spot that I have used for the past 15 years. The freshening wind dried things off nicely. I sat in the shelter of a tarpaulin, pegged out and supported by my boat oars, then settled down to celebrate the summer solstice with a beer or three. Then, as it was still early afternoon, I decided to follow my nose and take a walk. I followed the road that was built relatively recently to allow access to build the hydroelectric schemes on the Alt Esach burn, as I'd never walked its full length before. The road slowly meanders up the hillside, offering good views of the area. I have walked the burn a few times in the past, but it was always hard going due to boggy ground and many grassy tussocks. However, it's worth the effort as the burn forms many waterfalls as it flows over the smooth granite beds. In my younger years I enjoyed swimming in the burn and sliding down the waterfalls, as if they were man-made flumes. So although initially I didn't like the intrusion of a man-made road, it certainly made walking easier. I followed the road to its end, which was high in the hills. Although it was a grey, overcast day, it was still very humid and hot, so on my walk back I couldn't resist having a swim in the burn. And although I resisted going down the long waterfalls, I did feel a lot more refreshed and cleaner after camping for a couple of nights, and the freezing cold water soothed my many insect bites. It was still early evening when I returned back to camp, and as it was the longest day of the year, I decided to have a little bit of fishing. Little being a descriptive word, as all I caught were a couple of little trout, which I safely returned. I realised there would be no sunset on the summer solstice, so went to bed just as the rain started to pour down. The following morning looked just as wet, so I packed up and went home, happy that I spent the longest day of the year under canvas. I hope you have enjoyed the video and thanks for watching.